Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. JACALYN. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. JACALYN at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today, whether it's on a TV station, a radio station, or a podcast platform. This is USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. JACALYN KERBECK. I'm the founder, president, and chief listening officer here at our network. Please do subscribe to our channel by going over to YouTube. That's the easiest way to find us. Our channel is USA Global TV and Radio. Our show today is The Wise Ones, and I'm super excited about this particular episode. If you've watched this show before, The Corner Bookstore, you may remember Kelly Florence. We've interviewed her a few times, and we're going to be speaking to someone near and dear. They work together. We're going to hear her take on the work that they do. This is all about the science of horror, of monsters, of Stephen King, of women in horror. It's super exciting. So before we bring her out, I want to bring out the star of our show. His name is Red O'Loughlin, and I've had the honor of working with him for a few years now. It seems like 10 years, but it's not. He is my book coach. He's also a good friend. He is, in addition to being a co-host on this show, he is also one of our expert presenters on Talking Heads. You can find him. His episode is right after this one. And he is also an elevated listener, and he is the future moderator and host of a health and wellness panel that will be rolling out in January. Let's welcome him to the show, Red O'Loughlin. Hi, Red.
Hi, Dr. JACALYN. Always good to see you. Always good to be with you on these shows. It just makes my day when I have that chance, that opportunity. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always good to be with you as well. So, Red, as you know, The Wise Ones is a show where we really showcase people who have done amazing things, who have gone above and beyond. And I'd be remiss without mentioning that you are one of those people. You've got 5 doctorates. I can't even keep up with all the degrees that you have and the work that you've done as a longevity strategist and researcher. Tell us a little bit more about what it is that makes you tick.
Well, transparency and truth in advertising. I do not have 5 doctorates. I have 5 academic degrees, ironically, in all different subjects. My first love, long before I met my wife of 54 years, was chemistry. For whatever reason, it clicked. Sophomore in high school, I fell in love with it. I wanted to major in it. I wanted to become a chemist. That was my life back then. I did go to school. I did major in it. I did have a wonderful pre-graduation. I worked as a chemist in some labs as part of going to school. However, as soon as I graduated, I got an invitation to Vietnam, and that kind of stopped my chemistry career until many, many years later. My wife was going through some chemo for breast cancer, and I had been heavily involved with writing and speaking on motivation, self-improvement, and maybe I want to just delve into this thing and see what I can find out. So I started doing some research, looking at what can I do to help my wife's side effects from all these things. Long story short, it rekindled my passion, which is chemistry. Nowadays, I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships, treat a cause, fix a problem, treat a symptom, always be treating symptoms. And I need to make a quick fix to my computer before it falls off the edge of the world. Okay, that hopefully will work, yes. And so I write on it, I speak on it, and that's what I do. Now today on Talking Heads, we're picking up a new topic. Last 7 weeks, we've been talking about post-pandemic health. We're going to delve into brain health and mental illnesses. A lot of information there, a lot of it technical, but we'll make it nice, easy, digestible. And that's what I really and truly enjoy doing, sharing my knowledge, making it such that you pick up something. And all this is part is self-education, awareness. If you know something and you have the ability to say, hey, doc, what about this? then maybe it'll make your life a little bit better, or at least begin that journey to make your life a little bit better. And if you're not on any prescription meds, then we can always take you where you are right now and make your life better. There's no problem with that either. And today we happen to have a great author, a prolific author, in a rather unusual. Now, if I mentioned Stephen King, you have that's everything you need to know about a particular author. But if I said Meg Hafdahl, that may not conjure up the same, but they're in similar genres. And we're going to delve into that here very, very quickly. So, Meg, why don't you join us and let's get to know Meg a little bit today.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I loved hearing about you, Red, because my husband was a chemistry major and now he's a medical doctor. So he kind of went the same way as you and took his love for chemistry and turned it into his love of medicine. So that was very cool.
I love that area, but I've never practiced in it. I'm not a doctor, but it's an area that I truly enjoy. But How did you get into the genre that you're into? Let's start first. How did you become a writer?
I always knew that's what I wanted to do. From the time I was very little, I just gravitated toward books. And once I realized that you could actually write a book as a job, that blew my mind. And I remember in first grade, my teacher gave me a book about how to become an author because I was so serious about it. But at the time, I actually didn't think about horror, or certainly not even nonfiction horror. And I write both fiction and nonfiction, and I write screenplays and horror as well now. But it wasn't until I went through high school wanting to be a writer. I went to college and was a literature major. And in my mind, I wanted to write sort of the next great American novel. And I didn't think that really, translated well with horror. It was kind of two separate loves of my life. I loved horror, have always loved it. And I loved reading, but I didn't necessarily think I should be a horror writer. And it wasn't until I was kind of getting up closer to 30 years old, I was like, wait a minute, I want to write horror for a living. That's what I love to read and watch. And it really wasn't until I combined those two things that I became successful. So I kind of had to get out of my own head and realize that horror could be literary and I could do the things and tell the stories I wanted to tell and have a lot of fun in horror as well.
I've been told that. Go ahead, Dr. JACALYN. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's really interesting. And I love what Red brought up before about Stephen King. And you are the female Stephen King, if you look at it that way. So Halloween is upon us, right? It's coming up soon. Everyone's talking about the movie Halloween. This is a great time for the horror genre, but yet people are horror fans all year long. What do your fans, what are they like? Have you had an opportunity to actually communicate with them one-on-one?
Oh yeah. I love horror people. They're the best people. I think that, understandably there could be kind of a misnomer that horror people are mean or angry or something, but we're actually really nice people and passionate. And, I think the thing about horror is it's a very empathetic genre, and people who like horror, they like seeing the good guys win, just like people who like fantasy or action. And so, yes, I have met so many amazing fans, and yeah, it's Halloween, but you can probably see in my office, I love horror all year long. So this is the best time of year, but it's pretty much Halloween all the time for me. But yeah, I had the best, I've had the best interactions with fans. And also, like the other day, somebody literally, took the time to review my book, and actually 3 of my books, short story collections, and they compared me to Shirley Jackson, who's like my ultimate idol, up there with Stephen King. And so the fact that they took the time to do that and they said such lovely things, I think really speaks to the wonderful readers that we have.
I've been told that Stephen King writes for only one person, his wife, and that is that is if that's what he writes for. That his entire book is, that's the thing he has in his mind when he's writing. And so, do you have an audience or do you have a person? What is, I mean, we talked about your audience here, but when you're writing, do you see a particular person or do you see a group of people? But how do you take that thought in the brain and say, I want this person to understand what I'm saying?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that when I'm writing fiction, I'm really doing it mostly for myself, which sounds kind of selfish, but I think that I am really um, trying to probably access something that makes sense to me and then hope that it translates and that it resonates with people. And then when I'm writing nonfiction, I really love to think about people who are like me, interested in so many different things. When I write a book, our latest book was The Science of Witchcraft. And in my mind, not only was I thinking about the people who know not a lot about witchcraft, but I was also thinking about the people who know a lot about it. And I want to make sure that when they read it, they feel like I've done my research and I did my due diligence. So I guess I'm trying to write for people who are really smart and will challenge me.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's so important that you share that because that's a unique perspective. I haven't actually heard that before. So kudos to you for that because it's always pushing the envelope, right? Getting out of our comfort zone. And I feel like also with the whole genre of horror, like for me, that gets me out of my comfort zone. You can also start to like fantasize. Is there a lot of fantasy involved when you're writing?
Yeah, I actually say that the sort of the most time consuming part of writing is just like thinking and staring at a wall thinking. I like to walk a lot and think. It's actually I actually and now that the more busy I get and I've got two kids and I'm working on all sorts of different projects, it's hard sometimes to like actually find the time to think, which sounds silly, but that is actually a huge part of writing. When I was younger, I had a little more time to, walk around and pace and have nature help me think. But now I really have to be like, okay, for the next half hour, I'm just going to think about this, and that's where the true creativity comes, and it's really taking that fantasy and then doing what I love, which is turning it into words that hopefully, like I said, resonate with other people.
With your thinking processes the way you're doing now, obviously you came out with your first book and then a second and a third. Are you finding it easier once you get into a certain area? You mentioned witchcraft a minute ago, but as you're writing your individual books, are you finding the flow, even though you have kids, are you finding that flow just kind of develops more naturally?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I think I can probably work a little bit faster. I can work, with I know like where I want to find research, and once you learn about research, you kind of learn where you want to go and where you don't want to go and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely something that helps. And with my nonfiction stuff, I work with my best friend, and so that's actually really good accountability, because we always joke she's like kind of more organized one than I am. I'm organized and pretty organized, but compared to her, I'm not. So she's always on task, and so sometimes it's good to have that person, and she helps me keep myself in gear. So that's pretty good too.
How do you and Kelly divide up the work? Do you decide in advance, hey, you take this, I'll take that, or you put something together and then you meld it? How does that work?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the book. For Stephen King, The Science of Stephen King, for example, there are books that we each hold really dear. And so, for instance, like 11/22/63, his book about the JFK assassination and time travel, she was like, I want to write that chapter because she's always really interested in the conspiracy theories and stuff. And I knew, I had read Lisey's Story, a great novel of his, and I knew, and I'd loved it. I mean, I love pretty much everything he writes, but I knew there were just particular books that really held a special place for me. And so we kind of, divide and conquer that way. But then also, like right now, we're writing The Science of Agatha Christie, and we've actually kind of both putting our voice in every chapter instead of just one in one chapter. So that's been kind of fun, and it kind of helps kind of meld it together. And then we're going to start editing soon, and which is we edit together all the time. But you know, it's nice because we have a very similar voice. So and we kind of think similarly. So that helps. But then we also have things that like we are good at, and we have our strengths, and we can bring, like, I have more of a background in literature and she has more of a background in theater. And so we're able to like bring those in when we're talking about films and books and things like that. So yeah, we just kind of divide and conquer, and then we always come back together and make sure it goes together like peanut butter and jelly.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I just wondered, what is the difference between writing as an author or writing as a screenplay writer?
Good question. Well, I'm kind of new to screenwriting, and it's kind of funny because as a fiction writer, I love to use a lot of words. I love to describe things and get into great detail and all that stuff. And it wasn't until I started to, you know, we started to go to some workshops, get some feedback on our scripts. We realized, and maybe Kelly was telling me and I wasn't listening, but we realized that like I was using too much prose in the screenplays, and they're really spare, and it's really more about conveying things, obviously visually. And that's something I had to like learn and sort of train myself on, because my instinct to write about how the trees looked, it doesn't work in screenplay writing. You know, that's not something that the screenplay writer necessarily is going to talk about. So it's actually quite a whole different animal. I love it though, and I love learning and challenging myself, and it's been great fun doing that. I do that with Kelly as well, and it's just been a great adventure. And who knew that the two things were so different?
Yeah,
You bring
thanks
me
so much
back
for
to
sharing that.
you bring me back to a point, a couple areas, but one I want to go down right now because we're on it. I finished the TV series called The Offer, which is
Okay.
the book about, it's 50 years after The Godfather was written, and it's talked about how they actually got the book written. But the author of The Godfather was used as a screenwriter, and it was a terrible job. He couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't in his ability. I mean, he had to work with somebody else in order to pull that whole thing together. And we just talk about a screenwriter. It's really a difficult job. It's
Yeah.
not, and I really didn't realize how difficult it was until you brought up the little nuance about, you can see, you know, you write about this particular tree or something else going on. Well, that gets in our brain. But as a screenwriter, people are seeing things, and you need to make sure they see the right thing. And it opened my mind completely. I said, how can it be that different? And then I started thinking about it. And I think we've had one other author on this program, and he was kind of delving into it at the time. But it's really and truly a different world of writing. And did something happen that it gave you the opportunity, or is this something you just kind of been pushing yourself in that direction?
You know, both Kelly and I love horror films and horror television shows, and we started to play around with wanting to kind of make a television show out of our nonfiction books. And so we have been down that road, and actually we have several producers, and so we're learning about, you know, TV and how to create a television show, which, you know, pitching it and having something called a pitch deck and all these different things. And so that's been a really exciting adventure. So that was kind of like why we kind of went that way, because we felt like we had a really good start with the books that could really make for a good television show. And thankfully other people agree. So we're working on that. But then also I write short stories, I write novels, and the idea of adapting them myself was very exciting. Again, but you're so right. And I'm not surprised that that he struggled going from writing, Puzo, I think his name is, from writing the book to the screenplay, because I like to write very much inside people's heads and like what they're emotionally feeling and all of that. And when you are like sort of forced to, do that in a visual medium, it's so different. But we've now, after writing our witchcraft book, we wrote a screenplay, episodic, so it's a pilot episode of a TV show for something called Hellcats, which is a fictional show that we wrote about witches, and it was nominated. The script was nominated, and so we were able to watch a table reading of it by SAG actors, which was really cool. So we're getting some interest, and we're learning, and so yeah, we're hoping it just continues, and we can kind of spread our love of horror through TV and film as well. So yeah.
Dr. JACALYN, I think we're almost ready for a commercial break, but in the meantime, let me go ahead and set up our next discussion. The science of Agatha Christie, the science of Stephen King. It's starting to sound like a Bill O'Reilly theme of the killing of fill in the blank. So I'm assuming at some point in time, this is a series that you're going to be taking and developing down the road. So I'm going to let you think about that while we begin our commercial break here, and we'll catch you back here in just a couple minutes.
Great.
We may have technical difficulties, and if we do, we'll just keep on talking
Okay.
until. So, well, tell me about the science of what started that, and where do you see this going?
Yeah. So the science of started with the Science of Monsters, which came out in 2019, and that was basically our sort of first foray into really looking into the background and history and science of universal monsters, but also Jaws and all sorts of different monsters from horror films. And I think the most important thing to note is that Kelly and I do not come from a science background. She comes from communications and theater, and I'm a literature and film studies girl. So we really wanted to come at it from people like ourselves who are not going to give like esoteric information. We're really going to do the research and come at it like any person would. We want to make it approachable and fun. So we started with that. Then we did Science of Women in Horror, which is something very close to our hearts. And we got to interview amazing women in the industry. And then the science of Stephen King, and then the science of serial killers, and then the science of witchcraft, and now the science of Agatha Christie. So yeah, we're enjoying delving deeper and deeper. And really, I mean, even just Stephen King, we could write 3 books on. So we weren't able to cover half of his books. So there's an endless possibility as far as like what the next book could be.
Well, do you see 1 or 2 books on the science of Meg Hafdahl?
Oh, I would love that.
Well,
that sounds great.
Put that on the list because you may have some intimate knowledge in that field.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, just as things develop down the road and this genre gets bigger and your publications come out and you're much more well known, it might be good to have that one in your back pocket, because you never know when something like that might really be, I want to know more about Meg. And all of a sudden, Hey, here's the science of Meg. And
there you go.
That's one of those things that you meet your audience's expectations.
There you go. See, I love it. I'm a tough interview though, so I don't know.
A tough interview. In which way?
Yeah. Well, I'm just kidding. I'm not really, but I think I would let myself be interviewed by myself. I think
okay.
I could do that. Yeah.
I understand the context now.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned you have a couple kids. Tell us about them.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I have 2 boys, 15 and 11, and they sort of like horror. My 11-year-old actually is more interested in horror. I've let him watch Psycho, The Shining, and my 15-year-old's not so interested, but he really likes horror video games, which are like almost like movies now. So he's very into that. And they both want to be, they didn't say they want to be writers for like a job, but they both like to write, which I try not to make it too big of a deal out of, because of course, I don't want to push them into being a writer. As I mentioned, my husband's a doctor, so they have the completely different opposite sort of experiences to see. So I would love, if they wanted to be writers, but I won't push it.
And you mentioned before the show that you were born in Canada, and that's
Yeah.
kind of where you call home. And I noticed some of the books have a tendency to take place in the snow and other places like that. So
Yeah.
so I assume that
Yes.
that's your cup of tea up there as far as that goes, with regard to that's really where you love to live, and the outdoors and everything.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't call myself an outdoorsy person, but I do love nature, and I grew up in Vancouver, which actually doesn't have any snow. But then I moved to Minnesota, and so I live in Minnesota now, and I'm used to the snow and used to the cold. I was just in LA last week, and it was lovely, but you couldn't tell it was October. So I was very happy to be home, and I have leaves everywhere and pumpkins, and it's a little bit chilly, and it feels like, fall. So I very much love living in Minnesota. And yeah, I think there's something to be said about writing scary stories, either in like the woods or snow is it's a great way to trap people. And especially nowadays that everybody has a cell phone, horror can be kind of challenging. You have to find a way for them not to have their cell phone, or their cell phone not to work. So throw them in a snowstorm and you've solved all your problems.
Well, that's certainly a whiteout. Certainly, I've only been in one in my entire life, and it was impressive. You're sitting at, it's just white. So I can easily understand what you're saying. I'm sure you've probably been in more than one.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's so disorienting that it's not a normal body experience. Where up and down is, where left and right is, sort of what things are. But when you take that away from people, and now they have to, it's whatever they have innate in their beliefs and their fears, all those things can conjure up to me a lot of interesting stories. I'm not a horror fan, but I can see that whole plot thickening when you take away some of their senses.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I love about horror, kind of what you touched on, which is something like internal really being the driving force, and it being like that thing that ends up scaring you. Because when I'm writing my stories, I try to think about specifically why this character is scared of this particular monster, whether it be an actual literal monster or whether it be somebody who's trying to hurt them. But there's something within them that is sort of the impetus of the story, and it's what kind of sparks that. So I really like to play with that internal mechanism, whether they feel guilt over something, or whether they are not liking themselves for some reason, and how that interplays with the monster, whether literal or not, that they have to vanquish. And I think that is what makes, like I said, horror so empathetic, is that it's this experience of seeing somebody like kind of not only get rid of the zombie, but also get rid of whatever it is that was holding them back in the first place, which is a little cheesy, but I like that.
Have you combined characters from different books into another book?
So yeah, actually, there was 2 characters that I had written about in short stories that I brought into my novel series. And so I have a 3-part novel series, and it all takes place in a little fictional town in Minnesota called Willoughby. And I hadn't really planned to do that. It was just something that kind of happened. Actually, 3 characters. And it ended up just being a really cool experience. And I very much like kind of creating this world. Some people who are into fantasy will create very like elaborate, Game of Thrones type worlds. this one is more of a, little town in Minnesota with all this sort of supernatural and also not so supernatural, scary stuff happening. And I liked doing that. It was fun to sort of bring in side characters and then have them show up in a short story later. Or, I've always loved the towns that Stephen King has created, Derry and Castle Rock, and how he would bring, side characters back and be like, oh yeah, I remember them from Needful Things or whatever. And so I played around with that, and I actually had my mom's a very talented artist, and I had her draw me a map, because I also love when books have maps. And she drew a map of Willoughby for me, and that's in every book of the novel series is that map that she designed for me. So it kind of helps just like make you feel even more like you're in this world.
Well, speaking of in this world, the science of monsters, does that include also the science of ghosts?
Yes, we touched on ghosts. We actually, so I will admit I'm a little skeptical of those things, but doesn't mean I don't love ghosts. I haven't met one yet. But it was very cool, because something that we really like to do is interview people who aren't skeptical of certain things, and they have had their own experiences. And we interviewed people who are ghost hunters. We talk about the movie Poltergeist. We always kind of start every chapter with a horror film. And so we briefly touch on Poltergeist, but then we have this interview and they talk about the experiences they've had. And that's something that we really like doing, is giving a platform to people, whether it be we've talked to scientists, we talked to a psychiatrist about Norman Bates. We talk about in our witchcraft book, we talked to a botanist. We have talked to grief counselors, as well as actors and filmmakers and writers. And so we really like to have just a big, huge sort of difference. I mean, we've talked to law enforcement, and we've talked to people who are aura photographers, who say that they can like capture your aura on screen. And so it's just, there's so many fascinating people in this world. And so we're just pleased that in our books we get to not only talk to them selfishly, because it's amazing to get to know these people and learn, but also we love bringing that to readers and being like, hey, we've never met a ghost, but these people, they've had this experience and they can tell you more about it. And so it's really a great platform.
My daughter worked as a prison guard for a number of years, and she would be out on picket duty, and there was a ghost out there, well known to all of them. They named him George, and he would pull on her hair.
Oh gosh!
And she'd turn around. There's nobody there, and anyway, another time she's walking down, 2:00 in the morning. Everybody's in their cells, and here's an inmate walking in front of her, and she's just about to say something. He walks through the brick wall.
Oh god! Oh gosh!
And so there's, maybe there's some other people you can interview too, because they have this on a daily basis.
I know, right? And some people are very blasé about it. They're like, oh, that's our ghost, whatever. And it's like, I would love to see that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Ghosts are fascinating. And like I said, I was just in LA, and we were staying at the Roosevelt, which is known to be haunted by some celebrities. And I was really hoping that the ghost of Clark Gable would show up, but he didn't. Yes.
You went into screenwriting you wrote, then you went to become an author, then you became a screenwriter. I see part of your credentials are a podcaster. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So actually, kind of a couple of years ago, I want to say 5-6 years ago, we started a podcast called Horror Rewind. And the reason it's called that is because my co-author and best friend Kelly and I, we wanted to talk about movies that we had seen in our, adolescence, that we had nostalgic feelings for, horror films. And we wanted to sort of discover if they were like, the movies that we remember them as, if they really were good, or we just have nostalgia and maybe they're not that great. And so we watch them with kind of these new eyes. And so it's been fascinating. We do an episode every week, and really, it started out a little more scientific, where it was like, okay, is this movie gonna like live up to our expectations and all this stuff? But really, over the years, it's really just become very conversational, and it's a great experience. It's kind of like an experiment to watch these older movies, find out if we really do like them still. And then we've also started doing new movies. There's so many new horror films, and I'm a huge reader, so I love to talk about horror books on there as well. And horror television shows, and there's so much content out there that we love talking about it. And so Horror Rewind's really been like a good starting off point for people to sort of like find out who we are, and then they end up getting into the books, because it's really, the books are just a little sort of more formal way of us, talking about what we love, which is horror films or movies, or books or shows or whatever, through the lens of, hey, could this happen in real life, or what was this based on, or things like that. And so they kind of go hand in hand, the podcasts and the books.
What movie have you seen more than any? What's the movie you've seen the most amount of times?
Probably The Shining. That's probably probably The Shining. But I've seen the movie that really got me into horror was Dawn of the Dead, which was the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, the George Romero film. I've seen Psycho a million times. I mean, I there's too many to count, but The Shining is a kind of, it holds a special place. It just means a lot to me, even though Stephen King himself doesn't like that movie. I very much like it.
Interesting that you mentioned Stephen King not liking something. There's obviously we have our preferences, and why doesn't somebody like something like that? Because you think, well, but again, we have as we mentioned, we have our own inside fears and phobias, and maybe there's something that touched them in a particular movie or a book that just touched a nerve the wrong way, and we never know, because we may not even know why we don't like something.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. I know, like, as a mom, I've become more sensitive to anything having to do with kids in movies, and I know a lot of parents feel that way too. And sometimes you'll watch a movie before you have kids and after you have kids, and it's kind of a whole different experience. So yeah, for sure, it can matter even like what part of life you're in.
I've read about a couple very prominent, million seller books authors who do not read anything else in their own genre. They want to develop everything as their own. I mean, you said you like to read a lot. Do you have any hesitancy about reading a variety of things? And if something pops in your mind because of something you read, not exactly but obviously we have to get what is going to do in my next book. I mean, what's this character going to be afraid of, or how am I going to be able to induce that fear that is pushing that person beyond the limit? Do you get a lot of creativity from what you read or the movies, or is it just something that's self-developed?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it would be a lie really to ourselves if we didn't say that we aren't affected by media all the time. And I think that, my dad, I remember him saying to me, and this is something that sticks in my mind, is that every story's already been told. The love story, the boy meets girl, obviously that's all been done. Everything's already been done. So what are you going to do to add your voice to it? So, there's already been zombies and vampires and, werewolves and all that stuff. So what am I going to bring to it? And I think that has always helped me to sort of like navigate through it and be like, yeah, okay, so there's already been a story similar to this. That doesn't matter. I'm making it my own. And so obviously you don't want to like copy anybody, but I think that there's so much to be said about reading writers who just like make you love their words so much and the content of their book so much. And it just, again, it's challenging you. It's like, can you bring your own stuff to make your own thing just as good as that? And so yeah, and I love reading other genres too, but I mostly read horror, but I love nonfiction
How would you separate an alien from a monster? Well,
how are they different?
Yeah, that's going to be in your book, The Science of Aliens. Okay.
Yes, yeah. Science of Aliens.
I just finished a book that had an alien as a co-equal in the book, and I thought it was amazing the way it was developed. But anyway, we're getting down toward the end of the show, and I'm going to give you the last minute or so here. Tell people what you have to offer, what value you bring, how people can reach you. So I'm going to turn over the last little minute here to you, and take it away, Meg.
All right. So if you want to know more about me and my books, you can go to meghafdahl.com. You can also go to horrorrewind.com to learn more about our podcast. And I'm on social media everywhere. So you can find me. I like to talk about books a lot on TikTok. So I'm Meg Loves Horror on TikTok. I'm also Meg Hafdahl on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm Meg Horror Author on Facebook. And basically, I love to talk about, like I said, books, films. Let me know what, I love getting suggestions. I love when people say, hey, you should watch this and do an episode on it or write about it. And I also love to just talk about writers in any genre. So if you're a writer, and you want to just talk about the craft of writing, I love that too. And I'm pretty easy to find. I'm pretty much everywhere. And my books are available. All of them are available on Amazon. The Science of series is available at Barnes & Noble as well, in store usually. And my fiction stuff is a little harder to find, but you can definitely go to inklings.publishing.com if you want to support the publisher and buy straight from there.
Meg Hafdahl, spelled Meghafdahl. That's for our non-video audience. So Meghafdahl. And she's available on so many different, her website, social media. She's out there and available. So Meg, it's been a wonderful time chatting with you today. I loved it. And I look forward, maybe we'll do it again in the future. There's so many opportunities here at USA Global TV and Radio Network that I'm sure our paths are going to bump into each other again.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you so much, Red.
Take care. I'll catch you later on.
Bye.
Bye now. And I know that Dr. JACALYN was in the back doing the production, but sometimes there's technical difficulties, and we'll figure out what's going on here shortly. So in the meantime, we have an encore presentation we're doing. So until Dr. JACALYN reconnects here, because my shows up in 11 minutes. I know she has to be back for that one, and I got to go to a different studio, so that's not very far away. Not far away, but anyway. But she'll connect back with us here in a minute, and we'll go from there. But what is your predominant social media that you hit on every day?
Oh, usually Twitter.
Okay.
I have a pretty good following on Twitter. And I tend to post on there probably most often. And I'm not the best about posting on Instagram. It's hard to keep up with all of them, So Twitter mostly.
Okay. And that's at Meg Hafdahl.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Ever run anybody else with the same name as yours?
My husband's cousin, her name was Meg Hafdahl, and then she got married, so I got to keep it. She changed her last name, so that worked out for me because we got confused every once in a while.
Well, there must be something wrong with the deal, but we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to pretend like it's live, and we're going to continue live streaming. And at some point in time, Dr. JACALYN will reassume control of her show, and we'll pretend like we know what we're doing. You have a wonderful smile, by the way. I just love seeing it there.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
So that must come from, I guess your mom or your dad had a magnificent smile.
Oh, it must be my mother. She's a looker. That's what my dad would say. So
okay, and rightfully so.
Yes. My mom's an Okie. She's from Oklahoma, and my dad always says those are the best looking women, Okies. So
I'm sure you've probably been down there to verify that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you need me to hang on here?
Well, why don't we go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and let you close off. So why don't you go ahead and
Okay.
hit the leave the studio, and
Okay.
I'm going to do whatever I can in the interim to introduce my
Okay.
next program coming on,
Okay.
and hopefully at that point in time we will find out what the aliens did with Dr. JACALYN.
Okay. All right. Well,
Take
thank you,
care.
Red. Okay, bye.
Bye now. And Red O'Loughlin here, and about this point in time we'd be ending the show, so I'm going to go ahead and begin my part of ending it. The show that I have on next is Talking Heads. My next series, at least 6, probably the way things are looking at right now, is going to be talking about brain health and mental illness. What is it? What can we do? How do we diagnose it? What's natural? What treatments are available? What's effective? And those are things that, particularly in our COVID world here, where everybody's been isolated for such a long time, things have a tendency to exacerbate. So we're going to begin the first series today talking about brain health and those things that affect it. What do we need to keep it? What do we need to do to make it better? I can be found at redolaughlin.com. That's REDOLAUGHLIN. That's redolaughlin.com. On that website, at the banner at the top, has my phone number, my email addresses. Very easy to find me. Please give me a call if you want. I have my books available on my website or on Amazon. I write primarily on health and wellness. My niche is longevity. I do my best to identify the causes of aging and what you can do to treat it. You know, treat a cause, fix a problem, treat a symptom. You'll always be treating a symptom. So with that, I'm going to assume for at least the next 10, 15 seconds that Dr. JACALYN is here and back in control of USA Global TV and Radio Network. And I am going to sign off, and let's see what happens here shortly. So take care, y'all, and we'll catch you next week. Okay, when everything goes awry, let's okay, so I just got the update on my text, and it looks like I am just going to go ahead and close out the show and see you all next Thursday afternoon, and look forward to our next guest. Take care. Bye.